Okay, the next step in the assessment of higher cerebral function is to assess whether the patient is oriented or not. That's to say orientation. Really orientation, you have to test the patient ability to be oriented to the following: the person, place and time. First of all, I'll ask about the time in the following manner. بس حماد هسه تقدر تقول لنا هسه الدنيا الصبح ظهر ليل الدنيا الليل تقريبا بالساعة برأيك؟ Okay, so the patient able to recognize and he is oriented for the time now, and then I'll ask him about the place. هسه احنا حاليا وين؟ بالمستشفى. Okay, so he is oriented for the place. This is the second. And third, we have to ask him about the persons, really the patient's relative. We will ask him about them and about himself. At the time of examination, if there is no chaperones, you can ask the patient about him or herself and about yourself. بس حماد تقدر تعرف أنا منو؟
دكتور عبد الحمزة.
Okay, وأنت منو؟ Okay, so he is able to recognize and he had the ability to be oriented for himself and for the examiner. Really, this is about the orientation. The next step in the assessment of the higher cerebral function is about the memory. Real memory also we will take 3 types of memory, although it is more than this, but we will satisfy with these 3 types. First of all, I'll assess the recent memory, and then I'll assess the short-term memory, and lastly I'll assess the long-term memory. Really, for the recent or immediate term memory, I'll say to the patient a sentence. For example, you can say for him your name or any event, and tell him that you are gonna to immediately after that ask him about what you have said in the following manner. حمادة، أنا دكتور عبد الحمزة راجوج، أشتغل هنا بالمستشفى. هاي الجملة أريدك تحفظ لي إياها لأن هسه راح أسألك بيها وبعدين راح أسألك بيها. أوكي؟ شنو اللي قلت لك إياه؟
أنا دكتور عبد الحمزة راجوج أشتغل بالمستشفى.
Okay, so his immediate term memory is intact. For the short term memory, we need 5 minutes to be elapsed, so I'll postpone it to the last of examination. And for the long term memory, you have to choose previous events, and this is really according to the patient's age. So you can ask him about his, if he is elderly, of course, about his marriage status, about any war events, for example, Gulf War or whatever the events. In the following manner, I'll ask the patient about this events. بس حمادة ايش قد كان عمرك بالحرب أول ما بدت الحرب؟ يعني حرب إيران ملحق عليها مثلا؟ ما ملحق. بس سنة واحدة آخر شيء بيها؟ زين. وأول عملية صارت علينا، أول عملية عسكرية بال90 91. إيه؟ شو ملحق عليها؟ ومن ضربنا قصبنا بوشي؟ إيش ملحق عليها؟ وين كنت؟ هنا بالنجف، كربلاء، ديواني، وين كنت؟ بالحلة كنت هناك وملحق عليها. تتذكر منها؟ ليش تتذكر منها مثلا؟
أتذكر القصف اللي كان.
تتذكر القصف اللي كان؟ أوكي، كان ايش قد عمرك بذاك الوقت؟
كان عمري 13 سنة.
13 سنة. أنت يا مواليد؟
مواليد 90.
مواليد 90 وهاي كان عمرك 13 سنة؟ يعني قصدك حرب آخر حرب؟ مال 2003 كان عمرك بيها. أنت مواليدك بال90 مواليدك، يعني ما تتذكر قبل هالضربات من كان عمرك 6 سنوات 8 9 تتذكر بال2003. Okay, he is able to retain the informations gained previously in the form of long-term memory. Really, after that, I think 5 minutes had been elapsed. I'll ask him about the sentence that I had given him and ask him to keep it. That I will later, after a few moments, I'll ask him about. زين قبل شوية سألتك، أنا قلت لك فد شغلة لازم تحفظها لأنه راح أسألك بيها. شنو هي؟
أنا دكتور عبد الحمزة راجوج أشتغل بهذا المستشفى.
Okay, so he is able to retain the information of the short-term memory. Really, after assessment of the memory, we will assess the patient's ability or the patient's calculation ability in the following manner. I'll ask him either to subtract serial 7 from 100, which is, I think, it's so difficult, so I'll ask him to subtract serial 3s from 20, and at each step I'll ask him why. حمادة 20 إذا تشيل منها 3 ايش قد يبقى؟
17.
ايش عجب؟ شلون؟ تشيل منها 3 يعني شلون إذا حسبت لنا إياهن؟
من واحد يعني.
لا أنت 20 عندك وتنقص منها 3 فايش راح تصير؟
17.
17 يعني 20
19.
19 18 راح تبقى ال 17 نقص لنا 3
14.
14 ليش؟
لأن السبعة 17
ال 17 و 16 ولا 15 15 نقص لنا 3 12 ال 17 نقصنا منها 3 ايش قد صارت؟
14.
هسه شو تقول؟ ايش قد 14؟ 14 نقص لنا 3 11 صارت اوكي. At each step really we have to ask the patient why, but this is in reality depend upon the educational level of the patient, whether he is educated well to know how to subtract or not. This is the calculation ability. After that I'll ask the patient, or I'll test the attention and concentration. Attention means focusing upon a thing, while the concentration is the ability to sustain such a focusing. Really the previous task that I'll ask the patient about, which is subtraction, can be used for the attention and concentration. The patient was attentive and concentrated. But if you would like to assess further, you can ask him the following 2 questions. حماد راح أعطيك كلمة تقلب لنا إياها بالعكس وتقرأها. أوكي؟ كلمة حلب من تنقلب بالعكس شلون تنقرأ؟ بلح تصير اوكي. so he's able to, and then I'll ask him about number. هسه راح اعطيك رقم هم تقلب لي اياه وتقول لي ايش قد يصير. 591 من ينقلب ايش يصير؟ 90 من ينقلب 195. so he's able, so his attention is good and his concentration is good. After that really I'll ask him about reasoning and judgment. I'll ask him common questions just to elicit whether there are any abnormality about reasoning and judgment or not. طيب إذا أنت كنت تتمشى يم دائرة مع البريد ولقيت أكو يم صندوق بريد أكو لقيت في الظروف ومختوم وعليه طابع لقيته واقع بالقاع شنو اللي تسوي؟ ترجع ليش؟ لازم يوصل لحد so he's good. طيب إذا مثلا هنا قاعدين أو في مكان معين وشفت في حريق صار شنو اللي تسوي؟ تبلغ الأطفال. okay so his really judgment is good and his reasoning for that is also good. After that I'll ask lastly I'll ask the patient about the proverb interpretation. I'll provide him with common proverbs and I'll ask him what is meant by these proverbs. Really we have many common proverbs, but I'll use the following proverbs. طيب حماد راح أسألك في المثل وأنت تقول لي شنو معناه. أوكي؟ الباب تجيك منه ريح سده واستريح. شنو معنى هذا؟ شو يعني لك؟
إذا يجيك شيء ضار من عنده
إيه.
لازم
تتجنبه. أوكي. طيب المعلوح العنب يقول حامض. شنو معنى؟
يعني هو ما جاي يحصل
يعني هو ما يقدر يحصله فيقول عليه هذا الشيء. أوكي. This is really also depends upon the educational level of the patient, whether the patient is educated or not. I think he is very good in his proverb interpretation, and all these issues and all these steps is to assist the higher cerebral function of the patient.